So, hey guys, today we're talking about floodgates. So, before we really get into floodgates, first I want to talk about just negation overall, just interacting with cards. So, if I, for example, have, let's say, Baron de Fleur. Baron de Fleur over here is essentially just one negate, okay? So, pretty straightforward. So, if your opponent activates an effect, you can respond with Baron de Fleur to negate that one effect. But let's take it like a little step further. Let's say we just have a normal regular negate, because Baron de Fleur is still a negate destroy card, and this matters, so let's grab Borlode Savage. So Borlode Savage, same as Baron. It will negate the activation of one of your opponents, or just no wait. Yeah, this one is only your opponent, so you can only negate your opponents, so you can't negate your own effects with Borlode Savage. Baron can negate your own effects, though, for whatever reason, right? When a card is activated, yeah. So, Borlode Savage chains 2 to, like, some card effect, and it will not destroy it. So, like, for example, let's say I will normal summon Moyi, or something like that, right? And then I activate Moyi effect, Moyi still remains on the field. So for Moyi, this doesn't like super matter as much, right? But if we, for example, say normal summon Uni-Zombie and activate an effect of Uni-Zombie, you'll only be able to negate one effect with Borlode Savage Dragon, right? Baron de Fleur, if Baron de Fleur negates Uni-Zombie, Uni-Zombie is no longer on the field, so you're essentially negating both effects. But if Uni-Zombie hits the field again in the same turn, Uni-Zombie will be able to use the effect it did not use. And just for reference, Uni-Zombie has 2 effects, so I'll pull it out for you. So, Uni-Zombie, you can target one face-up monster on the field, discard 1 card, and if you do, increase the target's level by 1, and then you can target one face-up monster on the field. Monsters you control cannot attack for the rest of this turn, except for zombie monsters. Also send 1 zombie monster from your deck to the graveyard, and if you do, increase that target's level by 1. So essentially, the effects can be boiled down to discard 1 card from hand and send a zombie card from the deck, both as effects. And that's Uni-Zombie, yep. So let's just put Uni-Zombie here because it's an alright example. Another one that kind of works would be like Sudri. Sudri kind of has an effect on summon and then a trigger, or not trigger, an ignition effect that you can use whenever you feel. Kind of. There's kind of like another floodgatey attribute to it, like with Uni-Zombie. In this case, it's the same as like Branded Fusion in the sense that you can't like, for Branded Fusion, you can't like do any type of extra deck summoning aside from fusion summoning, and then for Sudri, it's you can only synchro summon monsters from the extra deck. You can't like fusion, you can't do whatever. It's like a synchro version of Branded Fusion, I guess. That restriction. But that aside, what if we have a card like, let's go with Abyss. Alright, so we have Hot Red Dragon Arcfiend Abyss. So this negate is also different from Baron and Borlode Savage, so they're all Omni negates technically. They can negate any type of card effect. So, quick effect, you can target one face-up card your opponent controls, negate its effect until the end of this turn. When this card inflicts spell damage to your opponent, you can target one tuner in your graveyard, special summon it in defense position. You can only use each effect of Hot Red Dragon Arcfiend Abyss once per turn. So, Hot Red Dragon Arcfiend Abyss, of course. So, if I, for example, normal summon Uni-Zombie, Sudri, whatever, if my opponent activates Hot Red Dragon Arcfiend Abyss, I also will not be able to use either effect of that card. Similar to like Baron, but there's some nuance to this. So let's say, for example, somehow my opponent protected their card against my Baron, but the effect was still negated, right? Or you didn't use Baron, you used something like a Borlode Savage negate. What if that card does not have a hard once per turn? Like, let's see. what was it called again? Like Shine Ball, I think? Is it Shine Ball? Yeah, Shine Ball. So let's say we have the Agent of Creation Venus. You can pay 500 life points, special summon a mystical Shine Ball from your hand or deck. This has no hard once per turn, no once per turn. So if you respond to it with Warlord Savage, you just made your opponent 500 LP poorer, I guess. But if we use, for example, Borreload, or not Borreload, Hot Red Dragon Arcfiend Abyss to negate instead of Borreload, then you can activate the Agent of Creation Venus as many times as you like, and the result will be the same every single time. It will not resolve, and that will be that. And if you do Baron, of course, it will not be on the field, right? But, like, this is, like, the difference in advantage. There's, like, an inherent small difference that sometimes comes up with negating a monster's effects versus negating a singular effect, right? Like, for example, with the Unizombie example, this is more relevant with, like, the hand trap, like, Ash Blossom and Joy Spring. Like, you can Ash Blossom and Joy Spring all three of these, right? It's probably most effective against, like, Unizombie outright, like, overall, right? Because, like, with Sudri, of course, Sudri is attempting to add a card, but you can already have that card in hand, right? But with Unizombie, you can't really already have the card in the graveyard, right? It has to get there somehow. And Unizombie is probably going to be that way. And then Agent of Creation Venus, well, there's no, like, hard once per turn on this effect, so you're not really doing anything. So, like, Effect Veiler, for example, is much more effective against these monsters than, like, an Ash Blossom, simply because it negates all of their effects. Or, like, an infinite impermanence in that case, right? So, because of that, it can be pretty brutal here, you know? With how, negating effect versus just negating, like, negating a monster's effect or a card's effect versus just, one negate here, you know? A continuous negate. So, this kind of translates over to FloodGates, of course, as well. So, if we have, for example, Skill Drain. Let's change to unlimited, I guess, real quick. So, let's say we have Skill Drain, of course, versus, let's say, just a normal monster negate back row, like Blackwing Close, I guess, sure. So, they're very similar because they only negate cards monsters your opponent controls. Okay, so Blackbird Close will, of course, negate one monster effect our opponent has, but actually, you know what? Let's also grab Plasma here, just to prove a small point. Okay, so Blackbird Close, of course, we're going to be able to negate one of our opponent's monster effects and then destroy them, right? So this would be like a Baron type negate, right? Of course. I guess we could say that. It's negate destroy. And this is a counter trap, so this is completely not respondable, right? So if our opponent, I don't know, normal summons Unizombie, tries to activate its effect, boom. Blackbird Close, it's not on the field. They can't do anything about it. They can't even respond. Okay? Well, unless they have, like, Grid Reboot, I guess. But whatever. So that's all this is, right? But let's say instead you control Destiny Hero Plasma or Skill Drain, right? Okay, now, no matter what our opponent summons, like they can summon Sudri, they can summon Unizombie, they can summon the Agent of Creation Venus. All of this, like, is just completely fine, right? Does this actually have a hard once per turn? I guess. So, let's say we instead have something else. Let's see. Let's grab something goofy. Something goofy would be fun, yeah. Let's do, I believe, is this hard once per turn? Well, it doesn't really matter. Let's say you have like 3 different like monster negates, right? Like, if I have Chizao, Hot Red Dragon Arcfiend Abyss, and then Baron the Floor, right? To negate my like opponent's monsters. In this case, they would have like somehow they summon the Agent of Creation Venus, Unizombie, Sudri, the Phantom Glimmer, right? I can use one negate each, like one from Sword Soul Grandmaster Chiza, one from Hot Red Dragon Arcfiend Abyss, and one from Baron DeFleur to like stop Sudri, Venus, and Unizombie from activating their effects. But if I just control simply like a Plasma or Skill Drain, which is one card in comparison to these three cards, then I of course can just negate all of these, and that's without activating a single effect, which is much stronger. In fact, we can keep summoning monsters and keep like going through different monsters, right? And they'll never be able to resolve an effect against Plasma or Skill Drain, right? They can activate literally 1,000 effects, right? If you can visualize that. And none of them will resolve, okay? But is there a way with like these cards for me to negate like 1,000 monster effects? No way, Jose, right? That's the power of Floodgates right there, and why there's complete justification to play them. Although it might like obviously not be fun for the other player, because to deal with a Floodgate, you simply need the out. In case of like Skill Drain, it might be like back row removal. In case of like Destiny Hero Plasma, you might want like some form of removal. But here's the other icky part of Floodgates. Nowadays, like maybe a bit beforehand, it was harder to protect your Floodgates, but now with like Plasma, you can, let's say, summon Plasma in a deck like outside of their intended like archetype, because this is somewhat generic actually. So with Plasma, let's say you can pair it up with like a Baron and like a Hot Red Dragon Arcfiend Abyss or something, right? So let's say you have those three. Now to out like the single Plasma, you need specifically like a Kaiju or something, or like Super Poly maybe to out this, right? So a very strong card that you may or may not be running, because this is Master Duel, it's a best of one, and that card is best for going second, and of course your opponent will not be able to set up Plasma on you like if you're going first realistically, unless you like Giga Brick, I guess. So yeah, rough. And even if you do out their Plasma, like let's say they did pair it with Hot Red Dragon Arcfiend Abyss and Baron DeFleur, now you have to deal with Hot Red Dragon Abyss and Baron DeFleur. But at least you can somewhat play the game in the sense that you can now activate your effects, but you still have to contest with their other like very, in general, powerful like negation effects that can completely like curb your ability to play. And that's really hard to deal with. So Skill Drain, of course, same kind of category. And like Skill Drain might actually not be the one for, yeah. So let's do There Can Be Only One. And even though we searched this up, it's going to be somewhat hard to find this card. Okay, so Tikaboo or There Can Be Only One. Each player can only control one monster of each type. If a player controls two or more monsters of the same type, they must send some to the graveyard, so they control no more than one monster of that type. This usually will prevent you from getting more than one monster on the field or accessing your extra deck. Or, well, in general, it hinders your play really hard, right? There are a few decks, I guess, that can play under, like, Tikaboo, but not really. And then, usually nowadays, you'll see Tikaboo actually paired with Hugin and the Runic cards. Hugin, of course, is, like, a 3 of. It's... Let's go back here for a second. Yeah. 3 of. They have not semied Hugin or anything, so you can have 3 Hugin. Meaning you need 3 different types of destruction effects to get rid of all of the Hugins. And then you need a 4th one to be able to destroy There Can Be Only One. Which is ridiculous. So, okay, just to remind you guys, the best back row removal card in general is Harpy's Feather Duster, which is at 1. And then your opponent has like 3 There Can Be Only Ones in their deck. Well, not right now, but before this was true. So right now it's 2, but your opponent has like 3 There Can Be Only Ones, and then they have 3 Hugins for you to get through. Do you even have enough back row card removal cards in your deck, considering the Runic cards will also be banishing the cards in your main deck as well? like, assuming you have 3 of Duster to contest these 3 Hugins, if one of them gets banished, it didn't matter because you didn't have enough Dusters to remove there can be only one anyways. But assuming you did have enough, if they banish one off of the runic effects, you now no longer have enough back row removal to actually even, like, theoretically remove there can be only one. And there ain't no way you can recycle from your banished, like, your copies of Harpy's Feather Duster. So, you're doomed. And of course, like, with how Runic works, we could go into that, but essentially you're just constantly drawing cards as you're banishing your opponent's, like, main deck cards, and you're able to prevent them from playing with cards like there can be only one, which is, in turn, protected by Hugin. And there's no way to, like, do anything about Hugin, aside from, like, maybe outright negating Hugin. Like, if you were to imperm Hugin and then activate, like, Harpy's Feather Duster, there is no real feasible way to get rid of, like, there can be only one. If you were playing, like, Effect Failure instead of Impermanence, for example, though, you're never going to be able to do the line where you, imperm and then, like, activate a Duster, because this can't be activated on your own turn. This is only available during your opponent's main phase. So you would need some kind of, like, removal that doesn't activate on your own turn. Like, I don't know. But also keeping in mind your opponent can remove that same card because Runic, they essentially had like 6 copies of every kind of like removal card they would want, right? Or like a negate. So, extremely horrendous to play against, obviously. Not very fun, one might say. But this is still pretty surface level, you know, because you can still technically remove there can be only one in skill drain. It's still feasible, right? This is where we get to, like, the much worse part. And this is just horrendous. You just can't deal with it, so. Let's go to now Dimensional Barrier, and then let's pull up Artifact Scythe as well. So, like the previous Floodgates, of course, these cards will prevent your opponent from doing some kind of important action in case of, like, Dimensional Barrier and Artifact Scythe. They're slightly different, but this prevents either player from special summoning monsters of a declared type from Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, XYZ, or Pendulum. You will no longer be able to summon that type of monster, and you will not be able to activate, or... Wait, you will still be able to activate, but their effects will be negated from those types of monsters, right? So Artifact Scythe will prevent your opponent from special summoning from the extra deck. But the difference between these two and the rest of these cards is that they're lingering. You can remove Artifact Scythe. You can remove Dimensional Barrier from the field. You can do whatever, right? You can, like, do whatever you want with these cards. It doesn't matter. Once the effect is resolved, you're going to be under this effect for the rest of the turn, meaning you have no access to your extra deck, which is very vital to most decks in general. So, of course, Dimensional Barrier as well. It does the same kind of thing in general. So your opponent will not be able to play the game, essentially. If I'm playing, like, a Fusion deck, I can no longer Fusion Summon, I can't activate any of my cards, and all of my main deck cards do literally nothing. So, yeah. Nothing. Nothing I can do about this at all. Dimensional Barrier, for example, you would specifically need Red Reboot to contest this. There is literally no other option you can do against Dimensional Barrier, assuming you are going second, of course, which is when Floodgates are most effective against you, is when they're already set up, of course, not when they're getting set up. So then, of course, there is Artifact Scythe as well. If you do not negate Artifact Scythe or stop the special summon of Artifact Scythe before it happens, you're doomed. And of course, if your opponent has, like, a Baron de Flor or, like, a Hot Red Dragon Arcane Abyss paired with this kind of Floodgate, like Artifact Scythe, what are you going to do? You can't activate Called By on the Artifact Scythe. You can't, like, imperm the Artifact Scythe. You don't have any option like that to stop the Artifact Scythe. And you're done for. There's, like, not much you can realistically do about Artifact Scythe. I guess you can stop your opponent from summoning Artifact Scythe if there's something like popping Artifact Scythe or summoning it. Like, for example, Baron de Fleur actually can summon Artifact Scythe. So maybe you have like a Super Poly and it's possible for you to activate Super Poly, getting rid of Baron de Fleur. Like, I don't know, your opponent's playing Speedroid and somehow doing a Scythe line. Because yes, then I guess you could Super Poly away Baron before they can activate Baron's effect to summon back the Scythe. And you're golden there. But more often than not, you're going to be completely destroyed by, like, the Floodgate, and you won't be able to do anything because you either don't run the out or it's simply not in your hand. So, of course, like, these monster-related Floodgates usually require setting up, so they're possible to stop by using, like, Ash Blossom and Joy Spring and stuff. So, not as bad as, for example, just your opponent raw setting Skill Drain and then activating Skill Drain. And maybe they'll activate Lord of the Heavenly Prison as well, so you can't, like, remove their back row, and they'll have Solemn Judgment set to protect the Skill Drain. That's not really contestable as much. So, in this sequence, I think these are the worst types of Floodgates. So, first, we have Lingering. Lingering is disgusting because after they resolve, there's nothing you can do. And generally, they're very hard to stop from resolving. Scythe is actually slightly easier to stop from resolving than, like, a Dimensional Barrier, for example. Or, like, let's say, for example, there was a really disgusting Harpy card. I don't know. Was it spelled like this? Maybe. Here we go. Harpy's Featherstorm. If you control a wind-winged beast monster until the end of this turn, negate any monster effects your opponent activates. If you control a Harpy monster, blah blah blah, it doesn't matter. It's just this first line. So, for the whole turn, you now can no longer your opponent can no longer activate any monster effects. And there's nothing your opponent can really do about this aside from having, like, Red Reboot in the hand. And that's it, because this doesn't even need to, like, wait for main phase or anything. You can just shotgun this, and then your opponent has nothing they can do. Assuming they're playing a monster-based deck, of course, and they don't just, like, set 5 and pass back. But, like, a lot of people will enjoy playing monster-based decks because, obviously, you know, this game is called, like, Duel Monsters, right? So, playing a monster-based deck and dueling people, yeah. Shocking. So, yeah, you're just going to get completely shafted by Floodgates. So, of course, like, to do the same thing any of these Floodgates would do, right? Let's say to negate a, essentially, summon, I guess, is what would be the equivalent to stopping your opponent from special summoning a monster from the extra deck. Every time they would special summon from the extra deck, you could, like, I guess, negate that card instead. So that would be, like, or, like, if your opponent controlled 6 monsters, I guess. It's not exactly how it would work with Scythe. But, like, you would require, like, 3 Solemn Judgments in comparison to, like, 1 Artifact Scythe, you know? Same thing with Dimensional Barrier. Like, if I had, like, 100 Solemn Judgments, as crazy as that would sound, on my board, that would not be as strong as, like, 1 Artifact Scythe. In the sense that, like, well, actually, Solemn Judgment's not a good example. But, like, let's say my opponent activates Dark Ruler no more, even if I controlled, like, 1,000 monster negates, for example. Even though that's not, like, feasible, right? Then, like, you know, you could Dark Ruler no more me, and then I'm just out of all of my bajillion, like, monster negates. But those monster negates are not even equivalent to 1 skill drain to begin with, which is pretty insane if you think about it. Like, you could negate, like, a billion effects that your opponent activates, I guess, right? On the field with skill drain. But, like, if I want to do the equivalent of that with monsters without doing a Floodgate, that's, like, nigh impossible, right? Like, if I had, like, 700,000 attack point Apollosa, I guess, which would be also like not really comparable, but kind of comparable. I can activate that Apollosa to negate my opponent's like monster effects, like, but like eventually I will run out of negates, you know. So yeah, that's like the extreme example, but more realistically, it's like if I have like 2 monster negates or whatever, it's obviously not as good as Skill Drain or like Plasma, which can negate like however many monster effects my opponent will try to activate. And let's say, for example, we have Borreload Savage. Borreload Savage can only negate so many times. Like, even if we pass back and forth a bit, right? You require a Boral counter to do your negate. Baron de Fleur requires it to be, like, resummoned, like, every turn. Because Baron de Fleur can only activate the Omni Negate once while it's on the field, right? So you would need, like, a new Baron de Fleur to remove it from the field or something. So eventually you'll run out of negates on Borreload Savage or Baron de Fleur anyways, but Skill Drain, will it ever run out of negates? No, it will just negate you forever, which obviously makes it stronger than like any possible like regular kind of non-floodgate negate. This is like infinite advantage, one might say, you know? And of course, like the thing about like these floodgates, of course, is that you're going to set up like your board first before you set up the floodgate. So even if it's like a 2-sided like floodgate, it will do nothing to you. Like for example, we have Fossil Dino. Neither player can special summon monsters. Okay, so I have like Baron de Fleur, Hot Red, Chizao for some reason, and Borreload Savage Dragon on my field, and Fossil Dino. I don't think I need to special summon anymore, but you might. But you will not be able to. That is simply how it is, and that's how it will go. So, like, I don't know. Like, let's say there's a card that just prevents either player from special summoning from the extra deck. Well, I mean, I already have all of my monsters ready to go, but you can no longer access yours, so I will simply win. That is basically floodgates, you know? And the worst part, of course, is dealing with, well, in the sense of when you're dueling your opponent, right? I think the most, like, one of the most unfun types of duels is when your opponent is playing, like, Skill Drain, there can be only one or something, right? Like that type of deck, because Skill Drain doesn't require any setup. You simply have it in your hand, and then you set it on the field, and then flip it over next turn, right? But then if I actually have the out and you don't have protection for it, right? Then you will simply scoop on the spot, you know? You will surrender. And that will be the whole duel. There's no gameplay involved at all, which is very annoying. Like, I wanted to actually duel, you know? That's kind of the point. Like, winning is fine and all, losing, whatever. I didn't win the coin flip, whatever. That happens, but when that's what the game state is reduced to, it just feels really bad in my opinion. And yeah, that's about everything I want to say about floodgates, and I kind of want to go a bit into it here. So that's all I've got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.